We are back again here for Financial Foundations, and it's the beginning of week 6. Last week we started talking about credit and the importance of credit. So we've already moved into that second half of the term where we're getting into more of the personal financial management kind of topics. And so I don't know how much of this we'll be able to get through today, but we'll take a swing at it. It's all material that is online in your classwork section. And we're going to want to talk about some budgeting, and especially budgeting for big purchases. What are two of the biggest purchases most of us are going to make? A car and a house. Very good, Brianna. Yep, exactly. Car and a house. How do you get ready for that? How can you budget your expenses? And in this particular handout, this piece of material is described as the art of budgeting. A lot of this is there to, if you've never come up with a budget before, first off, I would encourage you to do it in Google Sheets or Microsoft Excel, where you can create some formulas and you know, as you enter information and the data, it's going to do some of the calculations for you, and it's easy to modify if you need to. The big thing to remember about budgeting, hi Sarah. The big thing to remember about budgeting is it is a guide. And as a financial guide, you really need to allow some time to pass as you're living and spending your money and putting it into your budget before you can analyze, is my budget good, or were my projections bad? Did I miss something? How do I need to change my budget? Some people will think, oh, I got this budget. My budget for my rent was $450. I spent $450, so I don't need to change that. My budget for food was $250, but I spent $500, so I need to go back and change my budget. No, you don't need to change the budget, not yet. But because you need those kind of discrepancies to be able to say, ooh, I spent $250 more on food last month than I planned on. Why? Did I have a big party? Did I go out to eat more than I normally would expect to? You know, what was it that caused that big change? So a lot of what you're going to see in these handouts is sort of structured stuff that can help you develop and analyze your budget. But the starting place for any budget is goals. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the acronym SMART for goals, S-M-A-R-T. SMART goals are ones that are specific, they're measurable, they're achievable, they're relevant to your life, and they come with some kind of time limitation. So, you know, saying you want to save for retirement, that's not really a goal. But saying I want to save $75,000 by the time I'm 55 for my retirement, that's a very specific goal. It's measurable. It has a time limit on it, and you can determine if you've actually met the goal or not. Budgeting is a lot like that, because what your goals are going to help determine a lot of how you prepare your budget. So this handout breaks this down into some categories: educational goals, social goals. You know, my educational goals are to go to med school or become a lawyer. Well, that's a whole lot different than just saying I'm going to go to a trade school, or I'm done after I get my high school diploma. Financially, those have very different consequences, and the budgeting is going to have to be different as a result. Social goals. You're going to join a country club. You're going to join a golf club. You want to have memberships in different types of social organizations. Maybe, maybe not. Doesn't say you have to. But you got to think about that kind of stuff, especially if they come with a financial cost. Financial goals could mean anything. You want to retire when you're 50. You want to set aside X amount of dollars so that your kids can go to college, by the time they're 18, those sorts of things. Family goals. That's a good one. Are you going to just stay single? Are you planning on having as many kids as possible? Do you want to adopt? Adoption is an option for some people. Whether or not they can have kids of their own, adoption can be very expensive and time consuming. So what are your family goals? Those obviously have a financial impact also. If you're going to have the stereotype 2.2 kids, a wife and a husband in the household together, then that's what you should be planning for. If you're going to have 10 kids, that's a totally different animal, because now your housing is going to cost more, your food is going to cost more, sending them to college, as you can imagine, is going to cost way more. And so, maybe you're not at a point in your life to even think about that, but you shouldn't forget it. You shouldn't put it out of your mind, because at some point you're going to be faced with decisions like that. Health and physical goals. What kind of health and physical goals might be included in this? What's that? I couldn't understand what you said. Health and physical goals? What do you mean? Having insurance? Okay, that's not what this is really asking about. Are you the kind of person that is going to want to belong to fitness clubs? Are you going to pay for or do you need a private trainer? Do you like to go skiing? Do you like to water ski? Do you like to ride horses? All of those things have a different financial impact. Whether you have insurance or not, that doesn't really have anything to do with your health or physical goals. If you say, I want to be able to continue playing golf until I'm 75. Okay, well, what are you going to have to do in order to make that happen? You're going to spend a lot of money with greens fees and playing golf and clubs and all that sort of stuff. And you're probably going to have to take pretty good care of yourself. Hopefully you won't have any back injuries, because, that happens a lot with golfers because of the twisting involved. That's why I can't play golf. If you want to go snow skiing, that's very expensive, especially where are you going to go around here to go snow skiing? You're going to go down to French Lick, Indiana, and go snow ski down some little hill that's got fake snow on it? Or are you going to go to Colorado and go on a big mountain and go to Breckenridge and stay in one of those resorts? Expensive, big money involved, potentially. You like to water ski? Well, you're probably going to have to get a boat. If you just want to go play pickup basketball in the park with your friends, that's not going to cost you anything. You like to ride a bicycle? If you're going to ride a lot, you need to spend probably $1,500 on a good quality bicycle. Do you like to motocross bike? All of these different things are part of how you envision your life unfolding physically. And what kind of health you have can determine how long you're going to live. Recreational goals kind of falls right underneath a very similar kind of category. You know, what are the things that you like to do for recreation? Do you want to play soccer in an adult league? You know, you want to play basketball, men's basketball or women's basketball in adult leagues as you get older? You know, only a certain amount of time that your body can put up with that. Speaking from personal experience. So anything like this that could potentially have an effect on your budget, have a financial impact as part of this goal setting. That's where you got to start. Once you got your goals, you need to put them in priority. And you got to think about them in these terms. Okay. Short term, medium term, long term. Short term is like within the next month. You know, if one of your goals is to run the Boston Marathon next year, you're not going to get in shape to run a marathon in a month. You know, that's probably at least a medium term goal, maybe even a long term goal. If you haven't really been a runner and you decide you want to go do that kind of stuff, it might take you longer than a year to get in shape to do it. So why would you prioritize goals like this with these timetables, short term, medium term, long term? The main reason is because they don't all have the same importance. Short-term goals, you're going to have to act on immediately. Medium-term goals, maybe there's things I can do once a week or 2 or 3 times a week to get ready for that. What am I going to need to do? If my long-term goal is to become a lawyer, I got to be thinking about college. I got to be thinking about grad school, to go to law school. There's a lot of steps involved, and the long-term view allows you to plan those out. And so this handout also then gives you some ideas about how to structure your own analysis of those goals. Okay, now you've prioritized them. You have some timetables involved. What can you do now to work towards that goal? A big reason why a lot of people don't achieve their goals is because, especially long-term goals, it can seem overwhelming. All the things that oh my God, I'm gonna have to do this and this and this and this. Well, it doesn't mean you got to do them all this week or next week or this month. How can you develop a consistent plan to do a little bit at a time? You know, what kind of resources are you going to need to be able to do those things? Do they have a financial impact? So that's what those next couple of pages are about. Set those goals up, do that little bit of analysis to figure out what you can do now, what you need to do long term, and how you can continue to have sort of momentum, build momentum towards achieving those goals. Got to look at your income. You know, every budget's going to have 2 parts, 2 primary parts. You're going to have an income side and you're going to have the expense, right? Where's your income coming from? You got 1 job, you got 2 jobs, you got alimony from a previous spouse. You know, you got student loan money coming in. Where's your income coming from? Where do you expect it to come from in the future? This third question here is a really big one. What are your feelings about being financially dependent versus financially independent? Is that a meaningful question for anyone? It's on the screen if you can see it. What are your feelings about being financially dependent versus financially independent? And I'm going to take a risk here and suggest that this is possibly a more important question for women. Historically, again, I'll go back to the stereotype. Husband, wife, 2 kids. Historically, who's responsible for raising the kids? Usually the wife. Historically, go back into the 40s and the 50s. Was the woman working outside the home? Not so much. A lot of older women, my mother's age, for instance, she's passed now, but she was born in the 30s. What was the main goal for a lot of women back then? You didn't really think about having careers so much. Yeah, get married, have some kids, take care of the kids, be a housewife. That's how a lot of women define their lives. And weren't they financially dependent as a result? There's no hard and fast rules about that. Again, I'm speaking in very general terms here. Financially dependent on the husband, right? And so what happens if the husband leaves them or dies, leaves them for another woman, gets a divorce? What typically happened to women in that situation? They were financially worse off, right? Maybe they didn't have any skills. They hadn't worked. They hadn't been in the workforce. A lot of that started changing in the 60s and especially in the 70s. My mom had a career. She always intended to have a career. She wanted to be financially independent, and it's a good thing because her and my dad got divorced when they were adults after a long marriage, and it didn't affect her that much negatively financially. I'm not making a value judgment about either one of these things. There's nothing at all wrong if somebody wants to be a stay-at-home mom. When I was a kid, nobody ever talked about stay-at-home dads, but that can be a thing now too. And nowadays, you've got all different types of arrangements. You've got partners, you've got same-sex marriages, you've got any kind of family dynamic structure that you can imagine. It doesn't mean that both people have to work. It doesn't mean that one person has to stay home. There's all kinds of flexibility here. But if you want to be, if it's okay for you to be financially dependent, okay, that's a personal choice. There's some risk involved. There's risk in everything. And so how do you feel about that? That's a question that you should really be thinking about as you put a budget together. If you want to be financially independent, you're going to make your own way. You're not going to rely on anybody else's income. You may not even ever want to get married or get into a serious long-term relationship. Maybe you don't want to have kids. Okay, that's perfectly fine also. Wherever you are on that spectrum between dependence and total independence, it's okay. It's your decision. Just recognize that wherever you're on that spectrum, it's going to have different financial consequences for you and for budgeting. So the next section, where's your money go? This is one of the first things that you need to do when you get serious about coming up with a budget. You need to keep track of everything you spend for a month. And I mean everything. Keep a little notepad. If you put $1 in the vending machine and you buy a candy bar, put it down in the notepad. Keep track of where you're spending your money. And then after you've got that data put together, now you can go back and you can start to see where your money's going. Do you see any patterns? Are you eating out every Tuesday and Thursday night? You get to the end of the pay period. Oh, I don't have any money left. What happened? Where did my money go? This tracking, recording your spending is going to allow you to answer that question. And once you know, you're going to be able to do something about making changes. If you're buying too much junk food, okay, you'll be able to see that when you've recorded the fact that you've done that, and you'll be able to make some changes. So whatever the spending item is, whatever your habits are, we're all creatures of habit. Keeping track of it like that is going to give you a chance to make some changes. This next question is another big one. How do you decide what to purchase? Do you just like to go out to the mall and walk through the stores and just sort of randomly, oh, that looks nice, I'd like to have that, I'm going to buy it? Or are you the type of person like me? I hate to shop. I go buy something I need after doing some research. And now with the internet, it's easy to figure out how much stuff costs or where the best place to go is to get a good deal. So I'm not going to just randomly go shopping anywhere. That kind of stuff drives me crazy. Do you go to the grocery store with a shopping list, for instance? You should. Don't go to the grocery store if you're hungry, because what's going to happen? Oh man, I love those, marshmallow crackers or whatever, and you're going to buy some stuff that you don't need, and that kind of stuff often is going to cost you more than if you bought good quality food. So if you have a list when you go shopping, stick to it. That's part of the planning. That's part of how you decide what to purchase. If you're going to Designer Shoe Warehouse, you need to get a new pair of tennis shoes, for instance. Okay. You don't have to buy the most expensive pair. You can say, okay, I'm not going to spend more than $45 on this pair of shoes, and stick to it. You got a limit you're setting for yourself. Sometimes you have to do those kind of things, especially if your money's tight and you're trying to come up with something for the long term. So another related question to that, what factors do you think influence your purchasing decisions? What you really need and like? Oh, what you need in life? Okay. Good suggestion here from Jessica. What do you need in life? Food, clothing, accessories. Okay, let me ask you this then. Within any of those categories, what's going to influence you to buy one brand over another? Because that's what this is really about. It's about the brand. What's better? Okay, is it good quality? Is it going to tear the first time you wear it out? Yeah. Are you going to go buy something, a dress because Beyonce endorses it, or whomever, whoever the spokesperson is, you're going to go buy State Farm insurance because Aaron Rodgers is on there and all those guys? When you go to Target and you're checking out at Target, do you buy a bunch of stuff that's right there by the cash register? You didn't know that you wanted it until you got there. Well, those are influencers. Retailers do that stuff on purpose because they know people are standing in line and they might grab a magazine or candy bars or gift cards, because those are always right there also. And that's an influencer without even you really being aware of it. Of course, we got TV ads, we got internet ads. You got magazine ads, you got all kinds of promotional stuff out there that's trying to get you to buy their thing, whatever their thing is. So are you going to let that influence you or not? That is the question. You do? Oh, it's okay. You collect magazines? Okay. I'm a Jimi Hendrix collector, so I buy all kinds of stuff just because it's got him in it. So I used to have a huge collection of these little cars, but I've gotten rid of most of them because they were still in the packages, and I'm like, what am I going to do with these? Some of them, yeah. So you got to think about what's influencing you to buy the stuff that you're buying. The next page here gives you a suggested structure. You don't have to follow this, but it's a good starting point. And if you notice, you got 4 basic columns here. You've got the description of your income and expenses on the left. And then you've got the 3 columns where you're going to actually be seeing numbers go in. You've got your budget number, you've got the actual, and you've got the difference. And if you do that for every month, and this is why a spreadsheet like Excel or Google Sheets is perfect to help you set this up. Because this whole difference column out here should be a formula calculation where you're going to take the budget and you're going to subtract the actual amount from it. So if your budget for, let's say, rent, well, that's probably not going to change. That's going to be a fixed expense. That's going to be the same every month. And if you notice, these regular expenses here, these probably aren't going to change. Car insurance might change every 6 months. Car payment might change depending on what you're trying to do. If you want to accelerate it, if you have a variable rate car loan, something like that. Gas is going to be further down here, though. You see, that's grouped under transportation. And some of these things you're gonna spend money on every month. So you have to come up with some kind of estimate that goes in that budget column. How much are you going to put money in savings every month? I hope so. That's got to be a long-term goal. How much are you going to spend on food? Okay. You want to break that down into your groceries, food, and or purchased food, like from dining out somewhere? Probably should, especially if you like to go out and eat, because that's always going to be more expensive than if you fix your own meals. That's a good way to do it. You're just going out on birthdays or special occasions. Yeah. So you put your numbers in that budget column. Like I said earlier, wait a few months. If you start seeing, especially in a spreadsheet, a lot of times you can format it so that these difference numbers, anything where you have overspent your budget, where your actual is more than your budget, you can format it so that those numbers show up in red. For instance, that's where the phrase comes from, in the red. If you're overspending your budget, you're spending more than you got. And so that's going to have an effect somewhere in the long term. So those differences are what you want to pay attention to. 6 months or 9 months down the road, if you've drastically underestimated some budget numbers because it was something that you didn't know about, then you probably are okay to change the budget at that point. But you need some history, you need some time working with a budget. And especially if you're first starting out, how do you know what your expenses for a new home are going to be until you're in it for a while? That's very normal. So there's a bunch of different stuff in here, just like miscellaneous, medical, clothing, entertainment. Entertainment's a lot of times where people really fall down. Household items, personal items, whatever those are, tuition, school expenses. All those things could potentially be part of your budget. Then there's some examples in here. It's got somebody that's got a budget. She's got 2 jobs. This first example, Gabrielle, she makes $1,400 in total. Her net monthly income, $1,400 from 2 jobs. Her fixed expenses, rent, car payment, car insurance, so $420, $520. That's almost $600. Flexible expenses, $100 for getting to trade school, $150 for food, gas and oil, clothes, entertainment, personal. So $250, $300, $340, $400, $430. So she's got about $1,030 in those categories out of $1,400. Her rent went up. Her car insurance premium went up. Her actual expenses for food, $190 instead of $150. $60 for gas and oil. She underestimated. She estimated $40. $34 for parking and bridge tolls. So where does that go? It wasn't anywhere. That's part of transportation costs. Sometimes for commuting, you have that. So there's a bunch of stuff in here that she's going to want to look at. $220 for car repairs. How are you going to deal with that? Are there different types of savings that you should think about having? The answer is yes. You should have an emergency fund. Something happens that's unexpected. You break something on the car and it has to be fixed. It's not an accident, so you're not going to have insurance to pay for it. It's got to come out of your pocket. You need an emergency fund for unforeseen things. You need a long-term savings fund. What is your long-term goal for your savings? Probably retirement, maybe college, maybe your kids' college. Then something some people call a rainy day fund. You know, that's money that you can save for the long term, and that's like a bonus savings where if there's something that you really desired to have your whole life and you're finally able to do it, that's what the rainy day fund can be used for. But poor Gabrielle, her unexpected expenses also included 2 speeding tickets in 1 week. Those tickets cost her $230 in total. So what's Gabrielle need to do to get back within her budget? Yeah, she needs to slow down for one. You know, if she got speeding tickets on her way to trade school, maybe she needs to leave a little earlier. All these things in here too. Why was she over? Oh, she had a dinner party. She hadn't budgeted for that. Okay. Her car needed an oil change. Well, oil changes are pretty routine. You know, a couple times a year, you're going to be looking at an oil change. So those kind of things should be budgeted. But, you know, she's still in school. She's learning these things. And that's the way it goes. So the rest of that is all about how she can make changes. What should the new? No, this is just materials. This is structured information that can help you get started on creating your own budget. So if you're going to do this quiz for the art of budgeting, starts off with true, false questions. The budgeting process starts with monitoring current spending. True or false? That's true. You got to know what you're spending now before you can reasonably predict how your future spending is going to go. Most short-term goals are based on activities over the next 2 or 3 years. That's false. That's not a short-term goal period. That's long-term. Remember the listing earlier said long-term goals are a year or more off in the future. A common long-term goal may involve saving for college for parents of a newborn child. Yeah, heck yeah. Rent is considered a fixed expense. Yeah. You know, you sign a lease, your rent's going to be $800 a month. It's predictable. It is fixed. It's not going to change. It's not variable. Flexible expenses, and the next question, maybe it's a trick question, maybe not. Flexible expenses stay about the same each month. That's false. They wouldn't call them flexible expenses if they stayed the same. They'd be fixed expenses. So that's all that's in there for, is just to give you some other ways to check your recollection, check your understanding of what's in this particular handout. Anybody have questions or comments on any of that so far? So now that you know everything there is to know about budgeting, I want to look at why budgets fail. First reason, says no personal allowance. If your budget is so tight and your spending so restricted that nobody feels like they have any extra money to do what they want to with, what do you think might happen? They all might have to pitch in, but if it's me or you, and I've been working this budget for months now, and I've never had any extra money to spend, and it's really starting to tick me off. What might happen? Now, I'm not suggesting that there might be any sort of physical confrontation, but you might end up in an argument. You might go buy something on the sly and try to hide it. You might run to the mailbox and make sure that bill that's coming for the thing that you bought and don't want anybody to know about, that you got the bill out of the mail before anybody else can see it. I've seen people do that. So everybody, whatever you're budgeting, anybody in the household needs to have some money that they don't feel like they're restricted on. That's what a personal allowance is. It doesn't have to be a huge amount of money. But if you can't spend any money without asking somebody else about it, especially if you're in a family context, husband, wife, for really young kids, maybe that's a little different, but even the concept of allowance works for young kids because you need to teach them the value of money. So if their allowance is $2 a week and they want to buy something that's $5, well, they're going to have to do. They're going to have to save up for a couple of weeks. Yeah, wait for it. Don't, avoid the temptation to get immediate gratification. That's tough. So second reason, no revolving savings. Okay. What that means is that there's going to be some expenses coming down the road. So you start to put money aside for those expenses. Christmas, if you celebrate Christmas, it comes around every December 25th. It's like a surprise. So if you plan on purchasing gifts for family and friends as part of your Christmas celebration, you probably should be putting money aside out of every paycheck. Otherwise, you're going to get to the 1st of December and say, oh my God, Christmas is here. Where am I going to get the money to go do all this shopping? That's a revolving savings. That's planning some savings for a future expense that you know you're going to have. Car registration is another example that they mentioned in here. Mine comes up every February. It's a couple $100. You got to plan for it. I mean, I don't want to end up facing a situation like that where all of a sudden I got to go borrow money or do something crazy, or not get the registration and be driving on an expired registration. Things like that you can plan for, that you can reasonably foresee. That's what you need to save for. And it's revolving, kind of like the way revolving credit card works. You know, you save the money, you spend it, and you save it again for the next time. And it's just this constant movement, but it has an end goal, and that's to spend it on something very specific. Third reason listed here is you don't have an emergency fund. Things happen that you can't possibly foresee. You need to have some money set aside that can handle that sort of emergency. You don't have a miscellaneous category. Miscellaneous doesn't fit anywhere else. You may never spend money on that item again, so you don't need to create a separate budget item for it. So throw it in with miscellaneous. You know, you didn't know it was coming. Things like that are going to happen. It's just a natural part of living these days. Don't have to keep track of everything. Once your budget's established, you're not going to be changing your budget items, your list of budget items, like you would have that first month when you're trying to keep track of everything. You can be more general, because in the big picture, it's all about the bottom line, right? You want to come out with more money at the end of the month than you started with. If you're budgeting correctly, you've done that. You're staying within your budget. Your savings goals are being met. Number 5 here, though, is a killer. No evaluation. You create a budget and you don't do anything with it. You get tired of putting the information in there. You feel like it's all on you. Nobody else is paying any attention to the numbers that are going in here. So you quit looking at it. You're not evaluating how you're doing. How do you know if you're going to meet your long-term goals if you're not looking at the budget and what your actual compared to your budget expenses are? You got to look at that stuff on a regular basis. It can be time consuming, but in the long run, you'll be glad that you did. Number 6, a negative attitude. Well, okay, we'll try the budget, but I know it's not going to work. We've never been able to stay within a budget before, so why would now be any different? That sort of negative attitude, it'll probably start a fight, number one. You'll have an argument over it. But you've also kind of sabotaged the whole process, because now you've kind of spoiled the idea. You're showing your belief that it's not going to work. You know, if you and your partner can't get together on something like this, how are you going to manage really, really big decisions in the long term? So budgeting, and a lot of people, you know, divorce and split up over money issues, perhaps more than anything else, because they can't get together on this kind of stuff. You know, if I want to retire in Florida, and you want to stay close to home here because all the grandkids live here, and I'm bound and determined to retire in Florida, it's probably going to end up as a problem, because what does it mean to retire in Florida? It probably means a second house or a trailer or something, you know, and if your partner doesn't want to move, what's that say about your relationship? If you're going to stick to your guns and say, I got to, the only retirement I'm going to be happy with is to live in Florida. Probably split up. Yep. Now that's not me. I don't ever want to live in Florida. So it's just a hypothetical example. Guys, think of any other reasons why budgets might fail? Maybe from your own experience. Yeah. Had a baby? Oh, a surprise pregnancy. Ooh, yeah. Yeah, that's a big consequence.
And she's only 20 now, so like she was 18 when she had it.
18 and having a child unexpectedly, that can really throw a wrench into the works for sure. A lot of unexpected consequences come with that, and maybe didn't intend to get pregnant, but I mean, it happens, right? So yeah, that's a big item that you couldn't necessarily have foreseen. And once it's there, though, there's it's going to cost you money for sure.
It's cost them a lot.
That's a good example. Now, there's another handout in here that comes from that same series. What to do when you get in trouble. We saw that video before when we were talking about credit cards, the debt snowball, where you can start to increase payments, and then the amount that you have available snowballs as you eliminate debt. Hopefully you don't end up at that point. But there's all kind of reasons why people get in trouble. And there's different things that you can do to get out of trouble. The big thing to start off with here, and I want to emphasize a couple of these because you see signs around for people that for companies that claim they can repair your credit, they can fix your credit history. Nobody can do that. So don't pay anyone that says they can fix your credit history. So that first item there, credit repair company can erase a poor credit history. Totally false. Anybody that tells you otherwise is lying to you. Second one there, if you pay a bill late, your creditor can report this information to a credit bureau. Yeah, that's true. Anybody that you owe money to, if you're not on time, it can affect your credit. I think we talked before about this next one. A debt collector can contact you any time of the day or night except Sunday. That is false also. If you don't pay a debt collector cannot legally harass and threaten you. That one is true. It's worded kind of strange because it says they cannot legally harass and threaten you. But it starts off by saying, if you don't pay a debt. Well, the one before were about contacting you at all kinds of times, and this one kind of go together. If they're calling you at 10:30 every night, that's a form of harassment. They can't do that. That's not legal. A debt collector must inform you in writing of the amount of your debt, the name of the creditor, and an explanation of your right to dispute the debt. That is true. And if anybody calls you on the phone and says they're from XYZ credit card company and they need your information in order to make sure that you don't end up in bankruptcy, it's a scam. All you have to do is say, okay, send me that information in writing and I'll take a look at it. Click, goodbye. And they're going to argue with you. Oh, no, it's not that easy. Blah, blah, blah. They're going to come up with something.
My mom just hangs up.
Yeah, just hang up on them. I mean, if you're out there and you have some debts, if you're on top of it, it's no big deal. Anybody that calls you like that, you're going to know automatically it's a scam. If you happen to have gotten in trouble, the best thing you can do if you're getting behind is talk to the creditor. Make sure that you're in communication with them. Can you imagine all the different people that have struggled in the last year and a few months with the pandemic, lost jobs, didn't have, unemployment income coming in or any kind of income. Credit agencies and everybody, they don't want to go into foreclosure. Credit companies, they don't want to put you in default because there's costs for them associated with that. They would much rather work with you if they know what's going on. Credit Consumer Counseling Service will help you set up a realistic budget, contact your creditors, and plan future expenses. That is a not-for-profit. Probably, I don't know if it's still called the same thing, but there are legitimate companies out there that can help you do that. But they're probably on the internet as a .org, .org. That's one potential clue that they are a not-for-profit. They are there to provide a service and not to make money off of your trouble.
Aren't all .orgs reliable?
Good question. Aren't all .orgs reliable? Not necessarily, because anybody can buy a .org web address. You go on GoDaddy or one of the other website sellers, the address sellers. You can buy a .org. So if you see somebody that is listing themselves as a .org or a not-for-profit, what you want to find out is, are they a 501c3 type of company? That's a tax exempt, not-for-profit company under the Internal Revenue Service Code. If you see those two pieces of information together, .org and the fact that they're a 501c3, should be on their website. A legitimate not-for-profit is going to tell people that they are a 501c3, because if you make donations to that company, you can write off on your taxes.
Wouldn't that be on the very bottom of the website?
Somewhere like an about page or something like that, somewhere they're going to have it. It's not going to be the first thing that they'll see, but an about page would probably have their board of directors. It would have their legal structure. It would tell you when they got organized, as a not-for-profit, most likely, how long they've been doing what they're doing. Because those kind of charitable not-for-profits, everybody's out there looking for donations. Any kind of cause you can imagine has some not-for-profits out there looking for people to kick in money and help, because government doesn't provide money for a lot of that kind of stuff. So look for the 501c3 designations, and you'll feel better about the type of organization it is. A couple other examples in here, kind of like Gabrielle. Looking at the numbers, it's easy to figure out if somebody's in trouble or not. We don't really have time to go through all that in detail today. But the examples are there, and then lo and behold, look, you get to the end of this and you've got the same sort of budget worksheet set up. But the main thing I wanted to highlight there is just what happens, what kind of indicators for getting in trouble you might see, and what kind of rights you have as a creditor, because that's really could be really important if you end up getting some kind of financial trouble. Fraud has been a big issue for a long time, especially with internet. Identity theft is one of the big areas where fraud is occurring these days. When we were talking about credit, we talked about freezing your credit with the credit agencies so that nobody can open credit accounts in your name. Could be a good protection for you to consider. Then in this particular handout it just talks about fraud specifically. Multi-level marketing plans. That's another name for a pyramid scheme where early investors are paid off by money that comes in from later investors. There's no real business being done. It's just a kind of a money machine. Investment risks are out there. Of course, if you invest in the stock market, there's a risk, but there's risks in all kinds of financial products that are out there. Lots of people trying to push different avenues for you to invest, and just really a lot of it's just a way to get your money. Sweepstakes. Gosh, did you see that email that says you just won a 2-week trip to Cancun? Aren't they trying to get your money? She says, yes. And personal information, right? That kind of stuff you need to tag as spam in your email. Don't click on it. Don't even be curious to go look at it, because did you even enter any contests? Probably not. If it's too good to be true, it's probably not true.
I always get those Apple iPhone ones. Like, you want an Apple iPhone, but it comes up by itself, like on the internet, and you can't close it until you answer like this 25 questions.
Oh boy. Yep, people are out there trying to do bad things and hook you in with stuff. Credit card fraud is a huge problem for the whole industry. So it's just stuff to be mindful of, because it can wreck your budget. Obviously, if your identity gets stolen and they raid your bank account, that's kind of the worst case scenario. And on top of that, they might open credit card accounts and then go buy a bunch of stuff, and then you're on the hook for it. Thankfully, the law is on your side in those cases. If you can prove that it wasn't you, that somebody stole your identity, then you should be in good shape. Questions, anybody? So if you're gonna, like we said earlier, the biggest purchases that most of us are gonna make are a house and a car. One of the things to really be careful about, it's gonna be much harder to get scammed on if you're buying a house. It does happen occasionally, but the laws are much more strict about real estate transactions, and it's a huge purchase. You know, somebody is more likely to be a victim of discrimination than they are a victim of any kind of fraud when you're talking about buying a house. So if you know this 3-letter acronym here, HUD, HUD, Housing and Urban Development. That's the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. They are the federal agency that is responsible for ensuring that there's no discrimination in housing. It wasn't that long ago that before the Civil Rights Act, in fact, that was just approved in 1964. Before the Civil Rights Act, realtors and home builders could do what they call redlining, which basically meant you take a section of a city map and you draw a red line around it and say, we're only going to sell to white people in this neighborhood or these neighborhoods. That's illegal now. You can't do that. They used to be able to put land restrictions in the covenants and conditions to not be able to sell to African Americans or other groups. Can't do that. So discrimination takes a lot of different forms, and we're talking about federal law here. So if you think you've been a victim of discrimination, it could be the typical ones are race, creed, religion, sex. Race, creed, religion, sex. There's a fifth one I'm drawing a blank on. That always happens. I can't ever seem to remember the last one on the list. But the Department of Housing and Urban Development is there to help make sure that your rights are not being violated when you're trying to buy a house. So this fair housing segment of the HUD website is where you need to go if you think that you might have had your rights violated. And it's not just about buying a house. Renting an apartment falls under some of the same type of requirements for non-discrimination. That's a huge deal. America's taken a long time to come to that. It's still not perfect by any means, but you need to know that you do have rights to housing, and they can't restrict the location of where you go to buy a house, not legally at least. Anybody ever feel like they've been a victim of discrimination in housing? Well, that's good. I hope you never are. Okay, so you're thinking about buying a house. You'd like to buy a house. You want to have a yard, you want to get a dog, you want to put down roots, whatever your rationale is. How do you decide whether you should rent or buy a house? You have a question about the house?
Yeah, like there was this girl I knew who had a pit bull, and none of the houses or none of the rents would let her come and buy because of her pit bull. Why is that?
She was renting or buying?
She was trying to buy, but she was also trying to rent, but mostly buy. But none of the houses would let her bring her pit bull.
Well, there is a process called rent to buy, where a portion of the rent that you pay every month goes towards paying on the mortgage, and that after a certain period of time, then you become the owner of the property. Someone that's renting the home, though, see, an outright sale, if she's got a dog, she's got a dog. You're going to buy the house. The seller doesn't care. They just want to sell the house. A renter, though, someone that is renting their property, they usually are going to do one of two things. They're going to hang on to it for a while. So if that's the case, they don't want the liability that a pit bull can potentially bring, because they're considered a dangerous breed, right? And I mean, I've seen pit bulls that are just the sweetest animals you can imagine, but someone who's renting their property can't evaluate every dog that someone comes in with. So it's just better for them to say no pit bulls, no breeds of this kind, because they don't want the liability. Plus, those big, strong dogs. They can tear stuff up. They don't want to have the expense of repairs if that renter doesn't stick around, right?
Like where I used to live, we couldn't have above ground pools. What about that?
Above ground pools, was that a home that you owned?
Yeah.
Okay. Sometimes those are going to be restricted by the covenants for the land as it was developed for the neighborhood. Because a lot of people think above ground pools are tacky looking. So the developer, when they set up the property rules for the whole neighborhood, before they even start selling lots, they'll write down conditions that restrict certain things. You know, no fences in the front yard. If you want to have a fence in the backyard, it's got to be these 3 materials. The houses have to be 40% brick from the street. No front facing garage doors, you know, all kinds of, they write all kinds of stuff in the covenants. Yeah, one of those covenants could have been no above ground pools. So if you want to have a pool, it's going to have to be in ground. There's probably going to be a regulation then about whether or not you got a fence or an automatic pool cover to protect, you know, kids from falling in there, what have you. Land, and I used to work for land developers, so I've dealt with a lot of that kind of stuff.
We have an in-ground pool, but when my grandpa built the house, I call it my house. They live 6 doors down from us, so I practically live there. But around the pool, it has to be a certain type of brick and concrete. You have to have a fence around it, so many feet high. Like there's a whole bunch of stuff that you have to do.
And all those different requirements, you can break them down into 2 categories. One would be safety, and that's usually governed by the city or town ordinances. And then the second thing is aesthetics. What does it look like? How does it look? Right. And that's what the developer is going to be concerned about, because if they get a bunch of people that, for instance, if they didn't restrict storage of RVs in your driveway, then you got Uncle what's his name from Christmas Vacation moving in with his RV, you know, and then you can't sell any more lots because you got this piece of junk that's parked in the driveway all the time. I know it was. But that's the kind of stuff the developer is concerned about, because they want to sell all the lots. They want to get in there and get out of there, you know, usually 2 to 3 years. They don't want to sit there for 10 years and still have lots to sell, because then they're losing money.
Sorry about the question.
No, it's a good question, because it is something that I know personally that people have had to face when they're renters. Now, a sale, you know, you can put up a fence, you can do electric fence, you can do all kinds of stuff like that. It's your dog, it's your property at that point. You know, as long as you haven't.
Not where I live, the association basically rules everything. You can't, you have to go through a whole bunch of stuff to have a fence.
Yeah, they'll have an architectural review committee. There'll be some group of people that will, and as long as the developer is in control of the homeowners association, you can expect that kind of control. Because again, their mission is to sell more lots. They want to get out of there. They want to get all the lots sold and all the houses built. Developers usually get paid last. So whether you're going to rent or buy, though, depends on where you're at in life too. A lot of times, you know, if you don't plan on sticking around for more than a couple of years, you probably don't want to buy a house. If your goal is to move to Denver, you know, as soon as you're done with high school, okay, well then don't buy a house. You know, if you're going to go to college somewhere, don't buy a house. You know, those kind of decisions obviously have a budget impact, but it's something that if you're ready to settle down, there are a lot of benefits to owning a house. There's tax benefits. You know, your mortgage interest is deductible. Your property taxes can be deductible. It gives you some stability for your family. So, one last thing I'll show here. Back to the budgeting for a second. If you're going to want to save money on your budget, how can you reduce expenses? Here's and this is in the material too, is something called the step down principle. The example that's being used here is about food. It's about eating. It's about your grocery bill potentially. Stepping down in this case means, okay, are you going to a restaurant? Okay, what kind of restaurant? Are you going to Ruth Chris and spend $100 on a steak and another $50 on everything else? Maybe for a special occasion, you might do that. Or are you going to go to fast food? That's a lot less, right? But even within the category of restaurants, there's a lot less expensive restaurants out there. You can go to Logan's, you can go to O'Charlie's, you can go to Applebee's. Lots of choices for sit-down restaurants. Same thing with fast food. It's going to be a little cheaper. Lots of choices there. Even cheaper is to buy frozen food. Fix it yourself at home. How much you going to pay to buy a pizza out? 20 bucks, 16, 17, $20. You can buy a box of frozen pizzas for the same amount and then have multiple meals if you do it at home. Step down again, you do a mixture of things. Some frozen, like we usually do frozen vegetables because they keep longer, and some fresh foods. Ultimately, if you're making everything from scratch, you're using all fresh foods, you're making it all at home, that's going to be the least expensive way for you to live and stay within your food budget. So any decision you make financially, potentially you can go through that same sort of step down process to come up with at least a less expensive option, maybe help you stay within your budget that way. So Thursday, we will actually look at house payments, what to do, looking at how to look at the house before you buy it. And we'll do some car shopping. We'll see what kind of cars we can afford. Questions, anybody?
No.
All right. Thanks for being here again today. We'll see everybody on Thursday.
See ya.
I also have a question.
Bye, Jay. See you.
See you later, Ruth.